Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Get the Shot. Bit of a different episode this time. Today we're going to talk about the best moments of 2025, and I'll highlight each podcast, lessons I learned from the guest, and some behind the scenes stories about them. It's been really fun doing the podcast. We're looking to continue doing it in 2026. We have a lot of exciting things planned, so stay tuned to find out all about that. Without further ado, let's look at Glyn, our very first podcast.
A lot of your photography is very based on portraits and people in very, I was going to say exotic. Is that a fair word? Or
it's only exotic to us.
Yeah.
So for them, it's normal.
Yeah, right.
You know, so one person's normal is another person's exotic. One person's rich is another person's poor. Yeah, so it's all perspective. There, by the grace of God, go I, kind of thing. You know, I happen to be living this particular life, therefore that's completely different to mine. Yeah. And I don't necessarily want to go to places that are exotically different. More so than I want to go to places where the people there are as interested in me as I am in them.
Okay.
And that gives you that ability to have connection. Whereas if you go into places where everyone's kind of sick of seeing tourists, it's not the same vibe. You're kind of going there for the places and not the people, and I go for the people, not the places.
That's so interesting. So how do you find people to then photograph?
I have, and you go to a place like India, there's 1.3 billion of them. It's hard to miss people.
Just a few, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to miss people there. And I would say this to anyone who's reticent to photograph complete strangers, and that's go to a place like India, because they will call you over and demand you take their photo. So you kind of have no choice but to take photos of people because they expect it of you. So it certainly break your shyness pretty quickly. And if you're still shy, come on a tour with me. There's a shameless self-plug.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
That's the first. Let's just count them, shall we? My philosophy when walking down the street somewhere, when I have the intention of wanting to take photos, and this is not a stretch for me, is to walk around with a stupid smile on my face.
Yep.
Stupid being the operative word. If I walk along the street with a big stupid smile on my face, and I'm just kind of using my eyes to engage with the people as I'm going along, especially ones that kind looks interesting to photograph, I'll look at him and smile with my stupid smile. If he looks at me and smiles, we've got a connection. And straight away you can kind of get this energy. And then I'll do a little secondary little wave. And if he waves back, we've got a stronger. I can then walk over and say, "Hi, my name is," and sing some more Eminem to him. But it's fun in ways of building connection. I find that walking along and trying to engage people like that, you start picking up on body language. People that are open to be photographed versus if someone's hurrying along with their head down, you're never going to be able to say, "Hey, can you stop for 5 minutes and we take a photo?" Not going to happen. But if someone's just kind of wandering along and looking around and look at you and smile, well, there's an opening. So finding people is really, I kind of let them find me by how they react to me. And I've found that's, especially when there's a language barrier, that's a pretty easy way to connect.
I really liked what Glyn had to say about confidence in particular. Often, there's that discussion of nature and nurture, but it's also interesting how both of them in some ways can hold you back or prevent you from becoming the best person that you can be, especially in a creative format. So this idea that putting yourself in a different environment and trying new things and talking to different people of different cultures and backgrounds, it opens you up to new possibilities, which is just super wonderful. In terms of a funny behind the scenes story, that podcast, if you've seen it, it cuts off towards the end and it just becomes a still because the cameras we were using have a 30-minute record limit. So I learnt that then, but I thought that the audio was still so good and the podcast was worth continuing that I just got a still image and I used that as the rest of the pod, the video side of it. When I bumped into Glyn again, because he's one of our Tamron ambassadors, I see him quite regularly, he just cracked it at me and it was in a really endearing, funny way. But Glyn was a really good podcast to launch with. He's super interesting and I can't wait to see more of his photography in the future. Okay, next up, Cass Edwards. Let's see what she has to say. When you're at a gig or a sporting event, what are your sort of priorities? Are you trying to capture the anticipation of a movement? Are you trying to capture the atmosphere? Are you trying to capture like the moment something great happens? What's your sort of approach to all of that?
I mean, I think kind of all of what you just said is pretty accurate. You're definitely anticipating things. I think depending on the kind of musician they are or what kind of sport you're shooting, you kind of have an idea of what the big moments are and the moments that are going to get like good reactions from the crowd, just really dynamic kind of shots. So, in sports, it's always like if there's a massive goal, you're kind of capturing the goal, the celebration, but then you're also capturing the crowd's reaction to it. So it's kind of like action and reaction. They're kind of the two things in both, like, both sports and music that if you can get both of those, then like you're gonna get some cool shots.
I've noticed with some of your photos, it's not just like athletes with the ball per se or going for whatever they're going for. There's actually quite a few of athletes either looking around or they're really focused or whatever it may be. And so your eyes, I'm sure, are wandering the pitch up and down trying to find moments like this. Have you ever missed moments because you found a little story somewhere else on the field?
I mean, constantly. I've missed moments constantly. You can't get 100% of them. But I think something like ice hockey is a really good example of just moments happening all the time. Because you can have someone with the puck who's about to shoot, but then at the same time you have defensemen in front of the net kind of battling against each other. You have people setting up for passes. So I think ice hockey is one of those sports where you never run out of things to shoot. There is always something happening, and because ice hockey doesn't have too many breaks, you could easily shoot like 6,000 photos in a game and then stay up until 2 a.m. editing them.
Goodness me. So do you edit straight away after a game?
Sometimes, yeah, it depends because it depends on the requirements. So sometimes if it's a really big event, they often want the photos during the game and then after as well. But I think for me, just because I really like to go through photos, especially if I've kind of clocked while I'm shooting that I've got a shot, I'll go home straight away and be like, all right, where is it? Make sure I got it. And then it's like I can rest easy knowing I've got photos and that I've put some things out there.
I think story is a really interesting concept when it comes to photography because it's a still image, you're seeing just a moment, a pause, a fragment of time. And typically when you're at an experience, you can sort of imagine, okay, this is where the story is going to be. And you'd think, only look at this thing. But Cass brings up the interesting point that if you look around and you look everywhere and you open your eyes, you can find story and moments everywhere. And so I found that a really, really powerful thing to look into. And so I just found that moment really interesting and insightful that she manages to find more story in different parts, especially in the hockey context. Behind the scenes for Cass, we reached out to her for her to use one of our lenses. And basically on the tail end of the email, I was like, hey, do you want to do a podcast? And she said yes, which was really nice. And it was her first podcast, and ever since doing that one, she's actually done a couple. Can't wait to see her shoot the Australia Open whenever she gets the chance to do that.
I started in streetball, and it mainly happened because I needed a shift. I felt like everything I was producing was starting to look the same, feel the same, and I needed to shake things up. You can't grow unless you feel a bit uncomfortable, and I was feeling too comfortable. So I wanted to explore movement. I'm thinking about, for personal reasons, because I want to do a show. And I thought about all the different elements of movement that I could explore in terms of taking photos and shooting and being a part of. I have really easy access to basketball because there's a lot of street ball around where I live. There's a lot of basketball courts. I was like, okay, this could be interesting. This could be fun. I went to one event and I took photos of it, and I found it really hard. It was really difficult. The first one I did was crash the court, and it was indoors and it was raining outside. Not that that matters because we were inside, but the lighting was terrible. We were in a hall. And like I said, I'm so used to such a controlled environment, shooting things that are well lit and perfect and pretty and well placed, and I could take my time to take a photo and get the shot.
And when I think of RMIT basketball courts, I do not think of controlled or well lit or anything like that.
No, any indoor stadium that is like, unless you're at the top level, is not nice to shoot in. Actually,
Few exceptions,
scratch
right?
that, because I've had some stellar shoots this year
Yeah.
from some games that I've absolutely loved, and the lighting has been impeccable. But I think the dynamic range that I've had to adjust in terms of capturing a split-second moment and understanding how to read plays between people, and everything happens so fast, so you don't want to miss anything. The first game I went and shot, I came home with maybe 6,000 photos.
Goodness me.
I know. So ridiculous. And now I come home, and simply because I'm reading the plays better, I'm understanding what the players, if they were to receive my photos, what they're looking for in themselves. I know what a moment is that I need to capture, and the impact that that can have in that moment. You know, like the energy, the emotion, everything that's happening happens like in a split second. So being able to capture that is incredible. And now I think like a game that I'll go to, I'll come home with going from 6,000 to maybe 1,500 photos, which is much, much better, because obviously everything that we're shooting is high speed.
Yep.
So you're taking like bursts of photos as you're following a movement.
Yeah, wow. Okay. You've tapped on something interesting there. How important is the knowledge of the sport that you're shooting when you're a sport photographer?
I think it really helps. It definitely helps. Not I think, I know now how important it is, because if you're taking a photo of someone and you don't understand whether they're going to do a pick and roll, or if they're driving forward, or if they're guarding, specific players like specific shots of themselves doing what they do. So, you know, you've got bigs that want shots of them being like doing big things.
Yeah, go figure.
You've got like, go figure. Guards, obviously, you know, they have a specific role as well. So everyone would prefer, because they will use these photos later on as well in their packets to send to get signed for other teams, whether or not it's over in Europe or whether or not it's for another season here. You know, it matters to them. So making sure that you're being able to provide quality imagery for them to also be able to use, or their managers to be able to use in future, that's huge for them. So yeah, I think being able to understand the game, at least at the very least, to be able to understand it is really important. Yeah.
Leah taught me two really interesting things. She re-emphasized the importance on preparation and setting yourself up. You need to have knowledge of what you're doing with the camera. You need to have knowledge of your environment. You need to have knowledge of your subjects. You need to have the context of who's there, why they're there, all that sort of stuff. And so even if it's, you know, sport where there's less preparation needed compared to like a product shoot where you need to figure out a lot of things, either way, it's all about preparation. And if you solve your problems in preparation and in pre-production, once you get into production and you're shooting, everything will be totally fine. Well, things can still happen, but you'll have a better chance in production if you solve your problems in pre-production. Fun story about Leah. Leah is a friend of one of the marketing coordinators here, and just a friend of the business in general, Blonde Robot. And when I told her to come to our office, she came to a previous office that we used to work at. And so she was quite late. But by that point, the sun had set in this really nice way. And the lighting on that podcast, I particularly like. There's this cool bluish moodiness to it that's really nice and aesthetic. And it accidentally has become one of the best looking podcasts, in my opinion. Even though I'm pale and need to work on my complexion and probably apply some fake tan every now and then. All right, let's look at Bonnie. She was super interesting.
Could you walk us through one of your favourite campaigns or shoots?
I sometimes find there's like certain photos that just kind of like etch their way into being like, no matter how old they are, I still really love them, which is like pretty rare for majority of my work, because I think I'm very much I mean, like everyone in the arts, I think we can be really hard on ourselves, but I think it's a good thing, because if you're constantly looking at your work saying like it's not the best, then it means that like you're making progress forward. If I can look back on my work even 6 months ago and be like, I'm doing better stuff now, it means I'm getting better. But one of the photos that like stuck out as it's still a favorite, even though it's a couple years old. We were shooting a campaign for a really gorgeous brand called Lost Little Ones. They make these really beautiful bags, and we were shooting kind of out past Torquay Way at this beach, and the sun was going down. I was doing stills whilst video was being shot. So when you're doing that, you kind of just have to make do with like what's happening in front of you, especially when you're on a time crunch. No one's going to make time for like stills to be shot. You just have to go. If I can like paint a picture, there was this like kind of hillscape going towards like a cliff that then faces the ocean, and we had 4 talent that were just kind of running with the bags through that hillscape area. And I remember being like knee deep in like those coastal bushes, Aussie coastal bushes, trying not to fall over, and just getting them as they were running across, and that being like, okay, we got it. And I think everyone who's, you know, taken photos in those like high energy environments, you just get that rush of adrenaline when you're like, I got it, like it's there. And you pray to God nothing happens to your SD card because you've got this thing with you now. So yeah, that has like a special place to me. And it was also the beginning of like a really beautiful relationship with that brand. I went on to do a lot of shoots with them, and yeah, it was just great.
Yeah, I know the exact picture you're talking about, because I was looking at it before and I was like, whoa, this is just like, this is kind of the photographer not being there kind of thing. I feel like I'm seeing a beautiful moment and you're capturing it, and it was just so amazing and stunning and organic. I love that picture.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to be able to see it unfold, and honestly, like, we had such a good team. Like, that was a really hectic shoot day. I think it was like a 14-hour day. That was right towards the end of it, but it was complete props to like when you've got amazing talent who are just gonna like click and they really want to immerse themselves in the fact that these were like 4 friends pretending to go on a road trip. But at the end of this day, like I think a part of them kind of believed that they were, you know, reaching the destination of their road trip, and that energy coming through and them just, you know, committing to that. I mean, when you've got that, everything else plays in. I mean, it's also why like I really love working with performers. So people who do have you know, maybe it's like acting backgrounds, or even models that are just really comfortable kind of getting into like weird headspaces to push a concept. That makes me really excited.
I like Bonnie's point on reflecting and looking back on your work. It's no secret that we are our harshest critics and that we treat ourselves the worst. You know, if you're creative, you can relate to this. But the importance on reflecting and finding positive things and liking what you've done is just super amazing. And the fact that Bonnie emphasizes that is just really, really sweet. She's got wonderful energy, Bonnie, and it was just a really, really good podcast. So as you can see from the clip as well, I didn't host that one. I had gotten really, really sick over the weekend and had lost my voice entirely. And it was scheduled for me to record with her. But it was actually Talia, who hosted that podcast, who had initially gotten in contact with Bonnie for the pod. And Talia had been a fan of hers for quite a while. And so we're trying to figure out what to do. And I was like, I think it was either my idea or someone else's idea that, hey, why don't we just get Talia to host? And thank God she was down for it. She was a bit nervous, I'll give her that. But she ended up conducting herself really well and gave a really good interview. So if you want to see more Talia in front of camera and doing more podcasts, comment below and we'll see if we can get her to host again. All right, next we're going to talk about Alex and the awesome film photography stuff that he does.
So it all started after going to an exhibition at the NGV, the National Gallery of Victoria, by a photographer called Richard Moss. So he shot 16mm video footage film in the Congo on this. And I just absolutely fell in love with it as soon as I saw it. So went and tracked down where to buy it from. I actually found the same person he had been buying it from. That source is now completely dried up. So the film's really, really hard to get now. At the point that I was getting into it, which was probably 2017, the film was discontinued 10 years before that.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So how much film have you bought?
I've shot it on 4x5 and 120 film.
Yep.
4x5 I've had probably only 30 to 40 sheets. And then 120 I've probably shot 20, 30 plus rolls of it.
Yep.
Which in the grand scheme is actually very low numbers. 20 to 30 rolls of film is what I shot on my last holiday in Europe.
Right.
Not infrared though.
Yeah.
Because at $100 a roll, it quickly was very expensive. And I say $100 a roll, that was about what I paid. Now they're more like $400 a roll on eBay.
Okay,
So-
goodness me. Yeah. Well, there's a few people, I'm sure, with a fridge full of this stuff, and so.
And some people that don't know what they have.
That's
It's just-
true.
It's just put on a windowsill somewhere,
Oh man,
burning away.
You've killed some of our audience right now, and they've gone up. So your photos, they're not only dreamlike and surreal in the color and the space, but it's also like parts of nature that you don't really see too much, and I don't really know how to sort of describe it. So where do you find your locations to take photos of?
So with this film, because it's so alien, I really wanted to lean into that as much as I could. So I'm very happy to hear you say it looks so out there.
Yeah. Good out there. Yeah.
But I really wanted to lean into the alien, otherworldly look. So I've avoided anything too human. I've made a point of not shooting where there's power poles in the background, where there's fence lines that I can see. So it's been a lot of exploring bushwalks and so on to find some very unique locations. And just looking for something that really could be another world.
I think the journey that Alex goes on to get a photo is amazing and something that we don't really see or think about. It's so easy with our phones just to get it out. You know, I press my home button twice and I've got my camera open and I can just take a photo, and everyone's got a shortcut and easy access to taking photos. But with film and the particular infrared film that he works with, it's very expensive and he only has limited amounts. The whole idea of getting the shot becomes this really sacred thing, and you have to be really careful, because if you miss the shot or mess it up, you know, that's a waste of money and a waste of time. So the journey of actually getting the shot and the emphasis on that was something really important. And even if you're just shooting on your phone or you're getting into photography, take your time, be patient with yourself, and, you know, focus on the journey of getting the photo. All right, let's check out Jason Boland. Do you have any projects or photos that have just stuck with you for one reason or another?
Yeah, you know, there's always an image that probably looks really easy, and it ends up being like the hardest thing in the world to shoot. Like from the last extraction when we were shooting in Czech Republic, and there's a helicopter shot that I did, and I'm standing on top of a train, and the helicopter came in and all these guys are jumping out, getting off. And then Fred North, the helicopter pilot, he's banked the chopper to get out of the way. And there was one more guy left in there, Chili Palmer, and he's jumped out and he's like mid-air, like halfway between the chopper and the roof of the train. And the train's doing 80 kilometers an hour. And it was like it just froze in time. And my instinct was to zoom in on Chili as he was jumping out. But there's something in my head that just said, no, hold it. And I'm full frame. When you see this, I'm sure you've seen it or you will see it. But I kept it full frame, and it's like the tail rotor is like 3 meters away from me. Again, I'm totally safe. It's all, I'm protected. I've got an exit. I've got an out. But it's an insane shot, and it could have been ruined from me wanting to go for the action, and then it just would have looked like anything else. But the way that it was captured in the end was just, I don't know. I just love the fact that I was able to hold myself together and not have the little, well, what would it have been? The devil or the angel telling me to zoom in? Probably the angel would have been telling me to zoom in, and the devil was like, hold it.
Do you often get that? You feel conflicted about what to focus on and what to do?
Every day. And I think, especially with action, and I think that is probably why I like to use multiple cameras, because I don't know. And, when I set up a camera rig, none of them might go off, and it'll just be the physical camera that does. So, I guess I'm a bit like hedging my bets at a casino, but it's I'd like to say it's not always like that, but it probably is actually. And I hate the thought of missing out on something. Like, even when, if we do multiple takes, I'll move in, to get everything I can. Especially when we're doing like wider coverage, I can get all my shots in the wider coverage by moving around. Because sometimes these days, you can pop in and it'll be like, the camera will be, maybe 30 centimeters to 45 centimeters away from a face, and there's nothing for me there. So I need to try and get everything that I want as soon as I can, and then I can walk away and go and edit, and I'll come back and do some behind the scenes images.
So Jason just tells this remarkable story about being on top of a train and the helicopter flying in and people jumping out. And it's the most unbelievable, insane story you've ever heard. But I like what he talked about with the internal conflict. There's instinct and then there's your gut. And what are both of them telling you? And the lesson that he sort of talks about there is that you have to give yourself options. And that when you give yourself options, it allows you to try different things. It allows you to follow your instinct in one way and your gut in another way. So that's a really, really important thing to remember when you're making something, taking photos, getting video, is to give yourself options. So a really funny story with Jason when we recorded that podcast. As you can tell, we were doing it virtually. He's based in the Gold Coast and I'm here in Melbourne. And during that story, he actually had like bad connection. And so his screen was freezing a lot and I was only getting words here and there. So he would say like helicopter, train, guy jumping out. And so I was only getting bits and pieces of the story that he was telling. And I could tell that it was something like insane and remarkable. And I really wanted to go like, I'm sorry, Jason, could you just tell that again because you've glitched out. But, I just let it go. And then I heard the story for the first time as I was editing the podcast. And it's a clip that we made that has gotten like over 180,000 views, which is just awesome. But yeah, I totally didn't hear it when he was telling it to me. And I'm just like, yeah, awesome, sounds good. All right, let's look at Ewan Bell and his podcast highlight.
Every year we run at least one workshop. They go for 2 weeks. And every year it's slightly different. We have a different kind of way to run it. Like when I first started it, we were starting in one end of Sweden and we go across the E10 and we end up at the end of these islands just under the Arctic Circle. and that's on the Norwegian side. So we go from Sweden to Norway and things like that. And every year it's kind of different. And this year we're doing something a little bit different again, where we call it an Aurora residency. And we're just staying in one place. And it's a very special place because it's far enough away from all of the nightly Aurora chases, because everyone's going up there to do this. It's just crazy. There's 180 vans every night in Tromsø going out to chase auroras. And essentially they're looking for where the sky is clear, because if there's clouds, you can't see anything. So you're looking for clear sky, and on a bad night, they'll have to drive 3 hours to go to Finland and then drive 3 hours to come home again. And that's a long night. That's a tough night for the guys doing these driving. And what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we just want to stay away from all that chaos. And so we're far enough away from all those people, but in a spot where there's lots of beautiful scenery, lots of beautiful snow, and we have lots of options of where we can shoot within 10 minutes of where we're staying. And it's just a different way to think about it. So rather than chasing the clear skies, we're waiting for the conditions that are right. And we have just beautiful places to go to, like the one in the photo we talked about with what appears to be a campfire.
Oh, don't give away your secret. Is that how you keep photography fresh after doing it for so long? You change up the workshops, you change up the locations?
Yeah, I'm really bad at doing the same thing twice.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's just how my brain works. And anyone with ADHD will understand exactly what I mean when I say I can't do the same thing twice. And we had this saying that I don't walk to the coffee shop the same way twice. I literally won't take the same route. I've got to walk a different way each time.
Yeah.
So I'm really bad at, I can't just run the same trip every single year. Like there was one time I'd seen this guy was doing 18 different week-long trips. Oh no, sorry, 8. It was 8, not 18. 8 different, sorry. He was doing 8 week-long trips in Africa.
Yep.
But it was just the same trip over and over. And I just thought, if you're a passenger on the 8th trip that year, how fresh is your guide going to be? Like, how excited is he really going to be? I think it's important that if I'm not excited, how is anyone else gonna rise up to the moment if I'm not excited? So I've got to enjoy it, and if I enjoy it, I think that helps other people to enjoy it. And I like creating something new. Like I like creating. I don't just want to stamp out the same experience every single time.
How do you make sure that each person on your workshop has a unique experience and takes something individual?
Well, that just comes down to scale. If you have too many people in one place, you can't give everyone enough of your time.
Yep.
And there's always going to be people who feel they didn't get enough of your time, and they may not realize they're the ones who are actually taking up 2/3 of your time. Yeah. But there's, everyone's experience is different anyway, and everyone needs something different. So it can't be the same trip for everyone. And so if it's a small enough group, then there's an opportunity for people to step in a different direction, have different conversations. But also, you want a large enough group so that you end up with conversations you didn't expect. So again, it's never the same experience twice, right? Yeah. And part of it is the group dynamic changes how these things happen. And so the conversations that happen over the dinner table are just as important as anything that I might put up during one of the presentations that we run in the evenings and things like that. So we do have some structure in there. We have some specific presentations that have been worked up over the last 20 years. In fact, there was even a book that I wrote that essentially was from all of the things when people ask me a really good question during the tours. I think, that could be a chapter of a book. That's a really good question. And if I can hone the answer and really dig into it and get a good answer, then I've learned something from that process. And that's how I learn more too.
A big part of Ewan's career in photography is doing workshops. And as he talked about, he doesn't like to do the same thing twice. Whether you're a bit neurotic and you don't want to do the same thing twice, or whether you sort of have a bit of a routine, breaking away from that is a really, really good idea. And it pushes you to try new things. It pushes you to take new photos. It actually can be really beneficial, and putting yourself outside of your comfort zone in that process. And you'll be delightfully surprised by what you find, especially with that going to the coffee shop, never walking twice, what's the type of people that you'll see, if you go down this road instead of that road? or what type of buildings or graffiti and all that sort of stuff. There's inspiration around every single corner. And if you take a different process each time, you are more likely to find that inspiration. When we were developing the podcast, it was Ewan's idea to actually have the guest and myself on the couch and to have one light lighting the scene. I thought it was really impactful, and it's now sort of our iconic visual style here with Get the Shot. Ewan also just loves to talk, and he's given me a lot of advice over time. He's a good friend of quite a few of my co-workers and superiors over here at Blonde Robot. And it was a last minute thing because either a week later or a few days later, he went to Nepal for one of his workshops. He was just really wonderful to work with and talk to, and we'll be in touch soon, I'm sure. Next, we're going to talk about Dennis, the least Dennis Menace person you'll ever meet. He is such a sweetheart.
You've got a collection that is quite striking, and our marketing team have been looking at it all day, like yesterday in particular, when I told them I was speaking to you. Your ball of light work in particular, it's like sci-fi, it's so cool, and you go to these landscapes that like you can recognize it as Australia or wherever it may be, but it still doesn't quite look like it's on Earth. And so where did you get inspired to do the ball of light?
So early on, so my photography journey started pretty late. So I was 36 and I started making photos in the Barossa Valley here of the landscape, and I thought I was Ansel Adams. I thought I was the greatest photographer ever born. And then went on to Flickr, which back then, still now, but went on to Flickr and realized that, I had a bit to learn. But in mincing around on Flickr, I discovered this thing called light painting. And it was wild. I go back now, because you can go back in, I've got goosebumps thinking about what it was like. Like you can go back now to the early days of the big light painting groups on Flickr, and it was like the wild west of photography. It was crazy. And then one day, up on the screen came this orb, and there was someone making this orb, and for some reason, I just gravitated to it, right? I think some people, when they associate me with the ball of light, they think that like, this is not my thing, like nothing. There is no art or no light painting really that is unique. So I discovered this orb, and there were more of them and more of them. And what happened is there was this group of us, like a small group, maybe 10 of us, that just started this wild sort of, you think of it as a competition, but it wasn't. We were just pushing each other to take this orb and do crazy things with it. But what I did that was a bit special is I started taking it out into the landscape under a full moon. And so you do a long exposure under a full moon and you get these images that look like daylight. Like it's crazy. You look at them, and so that's what messes with the mind, is you look at it and you go, oh wow, okay, here's this landscape and there's this thing. It can't be real because of course you've just imposed it in Photoshop or whatever. Yeah, and that was really where my crazy journey started, was taking this idea of this ball of light, this orb, and seeing where I could put it in different places here in Australia. And then I don't use the word lucky very much, but luckily I have been able to go to some quite remarkable places around the world and insert this orb, which is great.
I think it's quite amazing as well. On your YouTube page, you have a very, very popular video where it's a tutorial about how to do the ball of light.
Yeah.
Why did you... It's sort of your secret and your trademark now, I guess to say. Why did you feel a need to then teach it and share it?
Something... Yeah, it's a great question, actually, because the answer to that question changes over time. I dip into many, many, many genres of light painting, right? So there's pretty much nothing that exists that I haven't had a go at, tried to become proficient at. There is this just complete and utter joy that exists inside of me when I light paint. And over the years, I've held workshops for thousands of people in some of the most amazing locations. And there is this energy that I see come from people when I watch them have the joy of making light painting images. There is some power that exists in that moment. And all I have ever wanted is for every single person that has the ability to put a camera on a tripod or the ground and go out and have a go at light painting. I just want everyone to feel that joy. And if I can share as much as I can about the process, most importantly, just instill in people that you don't need a fancy camera, you don't need fancy gear. You can literally make, and there's many videos on my YouTube channel, you can make a light painting image with a glass bottle, a $3 torch from Bunnings, and some duct tape, right? And that will produce often, there's a video that on my YouTube channel where I show you how to make a ball of light tool with about $5 worth of Christmas lights. Like, you don't need fancy gear. And mate, it's as simple as that for me. The more information that I can share and give out about all the techniques that I do, the more chance there is people will go out and feel that joy that I feel.
I think the concept of a signature style is like really, really interesting, because some people develop their thing, their shtick, and they stick with it, and they sort of keep it a secret. And there is an alluring aspect to it, and the fact that it's theirs and it's an identity defining thing is quite interesting. But Dennis, teaches and he helps people and he makes workshops because he wants to show people the love that he feels for the art form. And in the process, he becomes better at what he does. So if you love what you're doing, try and teach it to someone else. Dennis is such a sweetheart, similar to Ewan. He just loves to chat, and we were chatting, I think, for like 20 minutes before we started recording the pod, and like another 45 minutes afterwards, and we were just bouncing off ideas. And he says he wants to take me light painting, and so if you want to see us make a video about that and how to actually do light painting and all that sort of stuff, the behind the scenes, let us know in the comments. Okay, next up we're going to talk about radio mic.
The first one, when it comes to like using a camera to film a video or a podcast, and I'm just gonna put it out there and say it, like I think the best way to learn is just to experiment and get it wrong heaps of times. If you will never get to a point of being competent with this stuff if you're waiting to get to 100% before you start.
Yep.
Just start. Film something, and if it looks shit, can I say shit?
Yeah,
I've said it.
You said it.
if it looks shit, you're just like, okay, now I'm going to learn from this, okay? Because perfectionism is the thief of completion, right? If you're waiting to be a master of a camera before you start filming content, podcast, video, whatever, you'll just never, you will pretty much never get there, because you'll constantly be putting the handbrake up on, nah, this isn't perfect. So the first thing I would say is stop wanting it to be perfect. I know we want stuff to look perfect, but I think get it to as good as you can get it with the skill set you currently have. Then talking about how it looks, and like this room, and you mentioned Luke and Sassy Scott, there's also Swag on the Beat, I do. Those guys were really particular about how they wanted their videos to look, how they wanted it to feel tonally, and I think that's important because it gives your show branding, and it gives your show a vibe, because all of that stuff matters. And one thing I will say, and this is no critique or criticism of any studio in Melbourne that's doing this, but I do notice a lot that a lot of these studios, they are a lot of videos, clips of podcasts filmed in the same podcast studios, they just look exactly the same. And when I see them, I think, okay, so this show, I'm not getting any branding, I'm not getting any idea of what is this show, how am I supposed to feel when I see this show, because there's no set design and there's nothing like making it feel unique. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Because it starts to feel a little bit, not stale, but every single show has the exact same backdrop. There's no personality or vibe to that show. Like even if you look at going back to Joe Rogan, his studio has a vibe. Like you see the studio, you know kind of what you're getting into with that.
Now, I know what you're thinking. We've had a lot of photographers on, we've had cinematographers on, we've got videographers and all that sort of stuff, but what is this podcast producer doing on a Get the Shot podcast? And I think Radio Mike has some really, really interesting things to say. I always liked his content on Instagram, and I just reached out to him. I found his email and contacted him, and he was like, absolutely, I'm down to hop on. The fact that he talks about developing a brand, developing a vibe, developing a style, whether it's for your podcast, whether it's for your personal brand, whether it's for your YouTube channel. All that stuff is really important. And the signs and signals that you give and provide allow you to communicate certain things, even without saying any words. And it adds depth and complexity and identity that you previously wouldn't have. Radio Mike's Instagram is really, really interesting because he goes through all types of different stories and he gets up to all sorts of different shenanigans. He's quite a funny bloke. So definitely check out his Instagram and his YouTube. He's super insightful and interesting and taught me a lot about podcasting and the medium itself and where it's going and different ideas. Even though a few people on some of our Instagram clips have some things to say about audio being dead, but well, I'll let you check those out yourself. Follow us on Instagram, Tamron Australia. Good plug, hey. Okay, next we're going to talk about Jake Simkin.
Whilst at this hospital, you have a photo in particular of a boy and that you'd helped him out. I know the story, but
yeah.
You should tell it because this is really interesting.
Well, this is a photo that probably changed my life and my aspect and how I sort of saw myself wanting to going forward as a war photographer. Now, we were shooting, to give the sort of full context, we were shooting for Channel 4. It was like a video expose on the casualties of war during Operation Panther Claw. It was when the Americans brought another 50,000 troops to go and help the British troops in a province called Helmand. Now, Helmand doesn't have a proper hospital, but it would take about 6 hours to get to the Kandahar hospital. A lot of people died, especially civilians, children, and women died on the way too, because, you know, if you're shot or wounded, if you don't get enough proper treatment, you're probably going to bleed out by the time you get to Kandahar. And there was this one boy, and he had both his legs were being amputated, and he was fully conscious. Obviously, the medication hadn't really kicked in. And he was kind of looking at me, and he was smiling as they were actually sawing his legs off. And I remember filming him and just being, this is pretty fucked up. And he was smiling. And later on, probably the next day, I saw him. He was hanging out. His legs had been patched up. Had bandages, and they'd given him a wheelchair to sort of learn and practice using, because this is now he's going to be his life for the rest of his life. Though he actually didn't own, this was part. He did have to end up buying one himself, and I came up to him and asked him, I was filming you and you were smiling. He goes, you know what? Today, God made me live, and, I can only celebrate being alive, and, I was thinking, fuck, wouldn't you be pretty fucking horrible to have both your legs and, your life is dramatically changed? But he saw this positivity out of being severely wounded, and he didn't know where his probably future went, but he felt pretty positive that it probably had some sort of meaning. And that really changed for me to want to look for positivity and life, even in the most horrible of places and horrible of things that could happen to people. My ex-girlfriend at the time, I put some pictures out on social media, and she ended up giving me the money to buy a wheelchair for him. So I managed to buy a wheelchair within that sort of week. and he had a wheelchair that he was able to use. People welded extra bits and pieces to it, and he ended up having a job selling like cigarettes and candies and stuff, and had it all attached to his wheelchair. And about 4 years later, I came back to the same hospital, and I went to go track him down because I wanted to give him his photo. And they managed to find him and call him up, and he had been going to the disabled basketball, and he was part of the team. And that was like that was amazing to sort of see him again.
Wonderful, yeah.
I have never met anyone like Jake before in my entire life. It was quite a tough conversation for a lot of reasons. The topic of conversation regarding conflict zones, and there was, people who had passed away. The status of those in the images that are shown are unknown. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Jake has also been to Africa and conflict zones over there. He's been to Palestine and seen some of the stuff going on over there. But this message of finding hope in despair, and that little boy who tragically lost his legs to a landmine incident, and the life that this person now leads, I just found that really, really beautiful, and it's something that's stuck with me for quite a while since doing the podcast. I think we all can feel a bit sad, burnt out, depressed, or whatever it may be, but the fact that, in our privileged position, we can feel those things, and that across the ocean or in a different continent and country, that there's, objectively worse things going on, and people are still finding happiness and hope and enjoyment and fulfillment, means that we can get through what we're going through and continue to do what we do. Yeah, Jake was a really, really interesting guest, and that one was recorded straight after Radio Mike's podcast. So we sort of had a fun, lighthearted conversation with Mike about video and video podcasting, and then jumped to a lot more mature, conversation with Jake. And so that was quite a bit of contrast. And I just remember getting home and feeling exhausted and emotionally drained. But I feel very good that I had that conversation, and I learned a lot through that, which was just something quite amazing to experience and feel. All right, next we're going to talk about Dmitry Cherkesky.
One of the cast members is Blake Pavey.
Yes.
Great comedian, very funny. And there's a scene where the characters are sort of arguing and he's involved, and it's quite funny how they're all arguing with each other. Was that written or improv?
Bit of both. Well, mostly in that edit, what we've got is it's like 80% written, what we have, but what's happening in the story is like we had to have essentially like make it look like as though they've gone for they're trying to have a reasonable conversation, and then it devolves into an argument, and then the argument really reaches a forte. And so like I think essentially I told the guys like, okay, listen, we're just gonna like take the conversation and the build up and the climax, we're gonna put them together when we're filming it, and I need you guys to riff from this first chunk of written dialogue to the final bit of written dialogue, so that we have some energy to build from one to the other in a work in the edit. So as a result, like it kind of gives the actors a bit of permission to like play off of each other and like go into various different things. And particularly once I was in the edit and I was going through the footage, obviously like, yes, this is according to the script and all that, but then rather than the usual script cutoff, it's like, okay, this is where we now jump into the interview. You can push it out a bit more. It's like, okay, he's improvising now, but it's like starting to build that crescendo of that intensity, and it's purely it could not have been achieved had they not been given the permission to riff a bit. And so, yeah, I like. You kind of need to give, particularly comedians, the permission to be like, okay, you're gonna improvise, knock out whatever you got in your mind, but also it's like, we also got to keep the story going.
Dimitri is a good friend of mine, and we've known each other for like many, many years. And we'd always talk about like movies that we'd seen and stuff that we sort of like, and we have similar interests, but we never actually had a conversation about our approach to creativity, weirdly enough. Isn't that funny how, especially with guys, you can talk about everything but nothing at the same time? And Dimitri was a bit nervous to be in front of camera, is typically behind camera, but he actually had some really interesting insights. But I especially like what he said about having a plan and having an idea on what you're going to shoot, but being open to your environment and being open to the talent that you're with, and the virtue of being adaptable and what that allows you to create and allows you to produce. And the emphasis on editing and what the editing process can do, especially if you're a videographer or a cinematographer. Editing is your best friend. It's not something to be scared of or worried about. The way that your story develops and changes in the edit is truly amazing. And so give yourself the availability to do that, and you will be, delightfully surprised by what you end up creating. All right, let's now check out Jason and Callie Sterling. Jason, a lot of your photos have behind the scenes video that go about it. You've got a really, really big presence on social media and YouTube. I've got the numbers here, and I know you hate me reading this because it's a bit full on, but 2.6 million subscribers and 2 billion views on YouTube alone. You've got hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram and TikTok and tens of millions of views across all of it. How did you get started in doing the video side of your business?
It was her idea to make a TikTok like in 2021. She told me for almost a year to make one, and I was reluctant to do so. I didn't really think it was important to do the video portion, and I was completely surprised by how well it went after I started posting. Like the third video I posted had 300,000 views, which was absolutely crazy. And after that, I was hooked on making social media content. I started off just using TikTok and posting on there, and then Instagram introduced Reels, and then Facebook introduced Reels, and finally I decided I was going to make a YouTube because YouTube Shorts kind of started taking off. And I just kept the same kind of concept going. I like to show behind the scenes what actually goes into the photo sessions, the media days, like how much fun these athletes and students have when we're doing these media days, and show just a little bit of what it looks like, what you would see if you were there versus what it looks like in the camera. And my whole philosophy for all of my shoots is in-camera practical effects and getting almost everything right in camera. And I got that philosophy and that mindset from film school. You want to get everything as much as you can right in camera. You don't want a whole lot of post-production work. It saves you so much more time on the back end. And then kind of showing people hey, look at the back of my camera. This looks really cool straight out of camera. And then getting the athlete's reaction made for some really good social media content. And so I've kind of kept with that style for, I guess, four years now. And so it's doing really well.
What do you think it is about behind the scenes, just generally speaking, that gets people so interested and hooked?
Part of the reason that I think it gets people excited is they see what the setting looks like. For example, I had a swim photo shoot, I guess it was last month, and we just threw water on her from a bucket, and it made a splash when the water hit her. But when you see the image in the camera, and I show the image in the camera, it's got a completely dark background, and the water droplets show up perfectly. You can't really see all the water droplets because you have all this ambient ugly lighting in the actual pool. It's almost yellow looking. If you look in the behind the scenes video, it's just kind of dingy in there. But when you see the actual image in the camera, people are like, how do you do that? How is that lighting making it? Doesn't the flash make everything just look brighter? And so it's kind of they don't know how it works, but they're intrigued by how it works. And then of course you got to get the reaction from the athletes too, when the ones that are in the shoot, and then the your teammates who are also there, and getting those reactions also really help with the social media aspect.
This was a wonderful podcast to do. I had stumbled across the volleyball video that Jason had posted on his Rocktown Media account that has like 270 million plus views. By that point, I was contacting a lot of people and trying to get different podcast guests. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll send an email to these guys. They're probably busy. They probably won't respond. But they did. And, you know, we booked a time and recorded a podcast. And that was just with Jason. Now, unfortunately, the recording on Jason's side had some issues and it didn't sound very good. And so we did have to re-record it. However, I didn't know that Callie was a big part of Jason's success and business, and that they were both a married couple and business partners, and that she had her own line of work as well. And so when we were rescheduling and trying to find a time, I said, hey, what about we get Callie on and we sort of have you both talk about photography and your lives together? And so she came on and added a whole new depth and layer and different, you know, ideas to his work. She talked about her work, and they both just, it was amazing. They've been so generous with their time and their contribution, so it was really, really sweet to have them both on the podcast. I guess the lesson I learnt with the podcast with them was be open to new technologies and try new things. Be open about your behind the scenes as well. You know, the hesitation to start a TikTok, which then became starting a YouTube channel to then post all these different things. It's fair to say that it changed their lives in a lot of ways. And it was also really sweet to see that even with their massive online success, they're still very humble people. They're still super sweet, and down to do a video call podcast with some loser in Australia who was just nagging and wanted to get them on. Whatever you're doing and whatever level that you get to, be humble and help people out. Make yourself available to try new things. They're really sweet, and I'm super grateful for them. And whenever they're in Australia, I will, we're definitely gonna hang out. All right, last but not least, let's look at Rick Clifford.
Yeah, like I'll miss shots. I'll miss moments because I'm busy looking over this side of the stage when someone's jumped into the crowd over this side, you know. But I'll always like tend to have one eye in the viewfinder and the other eye open, so like my periphery is at least, you know, catching something if something's going to happen. But there's no real other way to sort of prepare myself in that sense.
How do you feel about missing the shot?
Dirty. Always. I'll be dirty at myself for like days.
Really?
Yeah. I like, can't believe I missed that shot. Yeah, it is. It's tough when you miss a thing. And sometimes it's out of your control. And then there's other times where it was completely within your control, but you just, for whatever reason, slept on it. You just weren't, you know, on your game. And that happens. And usually when that happens, it's like a bit of a wake up call for me to be like, okay, get your head in the game, you know, get, at least like look at what's going to happen prior to the show if you can. And sometimes because the pits are so busy with other photographers, like sometimes you'll miss the shot because there are other people in the way and stuff like that. It just happens that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can't get every shot all the time. Especially if you only have 3 songs to
yes.
get it done.
I'll use a tennis example, but Roger Federer was giving a speech and he revealed in a round of tennis, his winning percentage is 54%. So if you think about it, that's actually not very high. Mm-hmm. And he's been the world #1 many times, and he's my GOAT personally.
Okay.
But if you think about that, he's losing around almost 50% of the time, but he keeps going.
Yep.
And so isn't that a interesting thing to consider?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like, whilst I am dirty at myself if I miss something, I'm not like I'm the worst photographer in the world and like hating on myself or anything like that. It's just like, it's just part of the job. It's just part of the scene, that you're gonna miss shots and that, you know, you might have the wrong settings on or like stuff like that. It's like it's a numbers game for sure.
Yeah.
And some of my most proud photos that I've ever taken were random and chance. you know, like I couldn't have planned for them.
Oh yeah.
There's one that comes to mind is like the Strokes. There's Albert, the guitarist. He was literally like cutting sick on a solo, and there were like these like laser strobes that were happening, and basically I just took the right photo, the right angle, the right time when like a laser strobe was sort of like cutting through him sort of thing. And so he's just like holding his guitar, lasers are going through him. It's like one of my most memorable shots, and it was totally by chance. There was like no way I could have planned it.
Rick was a really delightful guest to have on. He had never done a podcast before and was quite shy and is a soft-spoken dude, but he really opened up and talked about some interesting things. And even though he's been a photographer for like 20-something years, you couldn't tell, because look how young he looks, he still gets that same feeling about missing the shot that he had, you know, he's had his whole career, and that's something that I feel about with my video work, and something that I'm sure a lot of our audience feels when it comes to photography. But the acceptance that you will miss shots, you will miss moments, and you will miss opportunities, but still keeping one eye open to your environment will actually allow you to find things that you didn't plan for. And I gotta say, that shot of the Strokes guitarist, God damn it, I feel so bad for forgetting his name right now. Hammond? Something Hammonds Jr.? Albert Hammonds Jr., there we go. That's his name. Yeah, that's a remarkable photo. And the fact that he didn't plan for it and still came up with that, it's not only just a technical thing, but it's a mindset thing as well. And so when you're open to different possibilities and when you're open to your environment, you will be so amazed by what you're able to produce. All right, that was everyone that we spoke to in 2025. I can't believe 13 episodes have just happened like that. You know, a quarter of a year has been really awesome. Speaking to all these different guests, I've learned so much about photography, videography, creativity. I've learned so much about myself, and I can't wait to do more podcasts. We are in the talks with some amazing guests. There's some really, really cool things to look forward to, and we're going to find ways to grow the show and develop it and do all sorts of new and different things. So if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel, like this video, check out our other podcasts, watch our clips, share them around. We want to grow this to become a really, really big, important podcast in not just photography or videography, but creativity in general. And any small lesson that you can pull from this from someone could actually impact how you change, even if it's the smallest lesson that you've pulled from one of our guests. If it helps update your mindset and challenges the way you do things, that just is why we do this. So thank you so much for watching, and 2026 will be a kick-ass year. See you next week. Take care, everyone.